that trailer. There we go. There we go. So I'm really excited for this panel today because one of the questions I get asked the most, we're all orange pilling people or attempting to all the time. It's like a fire hose sometimes when we're with family members and friends trying to get them to understand what this is all about and buy some Bitcoin. But one of the first questions is like, well, how do I do it? And we don't want people buying Bitcoin and then leaving it on exchanges or not being in control of it. That's the whole point of this thing, is sovereignty and taking custody of your Bitcoin. But it can be an intimidating process for a lot of people because it's such a paradigm shift to go from relying on banks and financial institutions your entire life to custody and secure your funds to going to a place where it's all your responsibility. And that can be very daunting, but it is the value proposition of Bitcoin. And so we have on stage today a bunch of people who have been trying to build solutions to that issue, to make it easier for people to secure and custody their own Bitcoin. So hopefully today we'll get some insight into the projects that all these people are working on, and we'll have a discussion about the different nuances of security, and hopefully we'll all leave with being a little less intimidated by this process of taking custody of your Bitcoin. So I'm going to hand it over to the panel here. Lindsay, maybe we start with you for an introduction?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Lindsay Grossman, and I work at Block, formerly known as Square, and I'm the business lead for our new Bitcoin wallet. What we're building is a self-custody wallet that's a mix of a mobile app solution as well as a companion hardware and a set of self-serve recovery services.
Clap it up. Yeah, clap it up.
Yeah. NVK, I started CoinKite over a decade ago with Dog Hacks, and we've been securing your Bitcoin for a little bit of while. A lot of you probably use our products, which is great. Yeah, so, cold card, NFC cards now, and looking forward to chatting to you guys about it.
So I'm a NIM online. I go by the name of our project, which is called Seed Signer, and I'm the creator and leader of that project that enables people anywhere in the world to build basically a hardware wallet from off-the-shelf parts, so they can do this in the privacy of their own home without interacting with a company that sells Bitcoin products, so it's a little more privacy-oriented. And I'm excited to speak with everyone today.
Hi, good morning. I'm Adam Lowe. I'm the Chief Product Officer for Arculus. We are a smart card-based hardware wallet for your Bitcoin that uses a secure element and three-factor authentication to keep your Bitcoin safe.
Awesome. So I think one of the interesting things about security is perhaps we can sometimes fall into the trap of thinking there's one best solution for everybody. But that's obviously not the case. I mean, we're not going deep glacier protocol for everybody because there's different nuances than just what's the most impervious thing to attack. There's so many other considerations like usability and user error and all of this kind of stuff. So I think one of the relevant questions to get kicked off here is just, how do you guys think about security when you're trying to design a product? What are some of the top criteria for building into that product, which are a reflection of how you think about the security spectrum? And so MVK, you've been in the space for quite a long time, and you previously were doing other work and then went into hardware wallets and hardware manufacturing. So how did you, when you entered the space, how did you think about security and what you guys wanted to build?
Yeah, so security, one is a moving target, right? Things are always changing, and your attackers are also always changing. And then you have the consideration of the user, and the user, more often than not, will screw themselves out of their coins, then they'll get robbed, right? So, I mean, we build products for people that want to get educated about Bitcoin. So it's very important to us to not dumbify it too much, because if the product is just too easy to use, people won't learn, and then they're going to get a text message saying, hey, can you give me your seed? And then you're going to give the seed because you don't know what the seed is, right? So we try to create products that sort of at least force people who are ready or interested in that to go that direction, right? And then On the other side of the spectrum, we have people that will not learn, or they're just receiving Bitcoin in a moment in their life where they may not necessarily have the chance to learn. And we do that with the Open Dime and the Sats card now, where you just receive a physical device, and possession is 9/10 of the law with that product. So if you just can hold it, we can keep it secure for you for as long as you need for you to learn about Bitcoin and then move the money out into your solution.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And Lindsay, what about you? Because you guys are building a product that has a demo or a market that's perhaps more broad than most. So how does trying to address that market influence how you think about security and usability?
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe I'll give a little bit of context. So the reason that we started this project is we really believe that the future of money needs to be self-custody. But
Amen.
Importantly, it needs to be easy, because the next 100 million Bitcoin users may not be familiar with all the things that's happening under the hood, and we need to build a product that is approachable to them, but also really secure. And it kind of feels like there's this dichotomy where you can either have user-friendly over here, but it has to be custodial today, or you can have self-custody, but it's highly technical, difficult to use. There's a lot of seed phrases. It's really challenging. I can't imagine giving some of these products today to my friends and family who are new to this space. And so what we wanted to do at Block is to create something that allows you to own your own keys, but to do it in a way where you have a safety net, you have protection in case life happens, in case you lose the hardware, in case you lose your phone. And so a little bit of context behind what we're building is the mobile app will store one key that you as the customer control. The second key is in the companion piece of hardware that will speak to the phone via NFC. That key you also hold as the customer, so you custody two keys. And then there's a third key, a third and final key on Block's backend, which Block's backend key can only do one thing. First and foremost, let me say what it cannot do. It cannot move your money, because two keys, which you as the customer own, that's how money moves. But Block only has one. So you ask, what's the purpose of this one key that we have in this 3-key environment? We can only do two things. One is that we can co-sign when you want to move money on your mobile wallet, and you can decide what the limits are. Let's say you say to the app, hey, I only want the mobile app to move money, let's say equivalent to 100 USD and below. We will then co-sign. And then the second and final purpose of the key that we hold on our back end will be to help you in a recovery use case. So, for example, the hardware, which is going to have a fingerprint, or if you don't like fingerprints, we'll also give you a PIN. That will help you if you lose your mobile wallet, for example. And so really what we're designing for is people who are, I like to say, new-ish to Bitcoin. Maybe they've gone to the Cash App, maybe they've gone to Coinbase, but they're starting to think about, as their money starts to grow, how can they own their own future and really custody, but also have a product that's easy to use.
Yeah.
So.
Before we touch on kind of the multi-sig versus single-sig approach to all of this, I think you made a great point, and it's obviously true that there's a spectrum of not only different types of users, but different stages in the same user. So if you buy Bitcoin and you have $500 worth of Bitcoin, maybe you're okay to leave it on the exchange or a hot wallet or something like that. And as the amount gets bigger and the anxiety you feel grows, well, then you kind of shift that anxiety to taking responsibility, and maybe you're looking for other solutions, which is why I think part of the reason why there's no single best answer to this, because every time your environment in terms of the amount of money you're trying to custody changes, then perhaps your considerations should change. But Seed Signer, you probably take the opposite approach of Lindsay. You're not going for mass market. You're trying to address perhaps a market that is a little bit more experienced and a little bit more considerate about the different nuances of the risks involved in hardware manufacturing and all that kind of stuff. So why don't you tell us what you think about security, generally speaking?
Right. Your original question was kind of what in our personal backgrounds might have informed some of our perspectives on Bitcoin storage and security. I'm a retired police officer. I had 15 years in law enforcement and spent the bulk of that time working as a digital forensic analyst. So I worked with both state, federal, and local authorities to assist with investigations and acquire information from devices, and kind of got to see firsthand a lot of the exploits that industry contributors as well as federal government participants have discovered for different security frameworks. So drawing on my experiences in digital forensic, there are a couple of design choices that we made. One is creating a very narrow protocol by which the device that communicates with your private keys can communicate with the secondary device that's communicating with the Bitcoin network. So we want to create that very strong separation between the device that talks to the Bitcoin network and the device that interacts with your private keys. And also eliminate any sort of wired connection or wireless protocol kind of connection. The other kind of interesting thing that we worked into the concept of seed signer is this concept of statelessness. So it takes the concept of a hardware wallet and kind of flips it on its head. What if a hardware wallet actually didn't remember your private key, such that you input your private key when you power the device on, you either set up a wallet or engage in transactions, but then when you remove power from the device, it doesn't remember your private key. So this opens up some interesting possibilities in terms of being able to use a single device to manage multiple co-signers in a multi-signature setup. Or even, we have a lot of users in developing parts of the world where it's not unreasonable for you to share a device with a trusted third party like a close friend, a parent, or a sibling or such like that. A lot of our users who are onboarding friends and family kind of like set them up with a seed signer, and that's their first experience or interaction with a Bitcoin hardware wallet. We've put a lot of thought into making interacting with the Bitcoin protocol at a nuts and bolts level still an intuitive experience, and have gotten good feedback that people are understanding more about Bitcoin just through the manual nature of interacting with our device. But
yeah, I think it's interesting that it seems like something similar that happened with nodes, right? Like it became like a hobbyist thing. Like, okay, I'm a Bitcoiner. I've been in Bitcoin for a while. Why don't I give this node thing a crack? And it turns out, no, it's not actually that hard. And you're able to take a greater degree of sovereignty, which I think a lot of us in this room are probably interested in doing, and that's why we're here. And something, I think this is becoming increasingly relevant, where Bitcoin, I think if you're in Bitcoin, you're at least somewhat adversarially minded. You're thinking like, what are the potential attacks? Who's coming for my Bitcoin eventually, like now or in the future? And we live in this environment where the censorship and the surveillance is to such a degree that maybe in the future we will have to consider more, how do we construct these solutions so that we can secure our Bitcoin absent somebody knowing about it, absent sending a device to our address, absent using a credit card to purchase it, all that kind of stuff. So I'm grateful that you're developing a solution that helps circumvent some of those issues in the future.
And I'd also point out, ours is just one approach of several approaches that are represented here on the stage. If in fact at some point people do come for our Bitcoin, or there's some sort of pushback in different parts of the world from persons in authority, it is so important to have many different models of storing Bitcoin. A diverse Bitcoin storage ecosystem is a healthy ecosystem. The more heads that the Hydra has, the more difficult it is to defeat the beast. So
yeah.
I just wanted to say that.
Totally agree.
Very well said.
Adam, how are you thinking about security as a spectrum and the users you're trying to approach in the product you're building?
Yeah, I came from defense before I entered payments. With our parent, we produce millions of smart cards a year. And when we thought about creating the product, we really had a couple pillars. The first was we wanted to make it easy to use, because if it's not easy to use, we can't get that mass adoption, similar to Lindsay's concept. So, we really want to hit that 80% middle of the market, right? When you first buy your Bitcoin, it might be on a hot wallet, and that's fine. But as you move and increase in value, it needs to go somewhere secure and sovereign, where you control your keys. So everybody's, tapped a card at a point-of-sale terminal. So we want to take that experience and allow you to secure your Bitcoin in the same way, right? So you have something your PIN in the system, something you are, which is your biometric on your mobile, and a smart card that secures, billions and billions and even trillions of dollars on the current fiat rails. So, that common criteria, secure element, literally secures kind of the entire global banking ecosystem and is secure enough to secure your Bitcoin.
We talked about multi-signature a few minutes ago, and a lot of collaborative custody solutions are emerging to help alleviate the anxiety that people feel about being in total control of their Bitcoin. And there's also many other downstream applications, something like inheritance, which I think a lot of us have considered before. It's like, okay, well, my shit's secure, but what happens if something happens to me? If I get hit by a bus tomorrow or something like that. So Lindsay, why don't you go
Yeah.
in terms of how you guys are approaching multi-signature and why you think it's the best solution for what you're building?
Yeah, and I think maybe one thing on the inheritance use case. So my background has been in fiat before. I worked at payments companies, worked on infrastructure, building consumer products as well, and B2B. And when I started to explore this landscape, it really scared me that things like inheritance haven't really been thought through. 12 or 24 seed phrases feel really special if it has an artisanal feel to it, you're an early adopter, but I don't think that the next 100 million customers are going to be okay with navigating those things. And what if you die? How do you pass it on to your family? And so if you start to think about multi-sig and the idea that a wallet is a composition of things, maybe a mobile app and a hardware, you can give different permissions to it. As we think about, we're still working through how we're going to build some of our recovery use cases, but we absolutely have inheritance in mind because life happens. You drop some hardware in the ocean, you lose your phone. This shouldn't be about losing your money. People should have your back, and I think there's a really important use case that you can tie inheritance to the properties of multi-sig.
Mm-hmm.
So the main issue is always trade-offs, right, when it comes to security. So, seeds do work incredibly well because humans have traditionally been very good at passing on their stuff to the people who gets their stuff when they're dead. Right? So we already have a lot of infrastructure around passing on safe deposit boxes and things like that. Those are better in sort of developed world where people are a little bit more wealthy and the infrastructure is there and safer and you have good legal systems, right? The main issue with, say, multi-sig is like now introduce a lot of complexity. Right? So it's not just one seed, it might be many, or it could be that you have to have a company release their HSM seed to the customer. I think as we progress, and we have been progressing, I mean, it used to be an absolute disaster back in the day, but now we're started finding the paths for, I have this amount of money, I live in this profile of a country with this profile of security, maybe the multi-sig with collaborative with a company will transfer that better, but in that sense, I lose all the privacy on my coins, right? Because if a service knows the private key, one of the private keys, or knows the quorum, right? They are processing your transaction, so they know all your coins. Mm-hmm. But it is really good if you're trying to pass that on. Now, if your concern is bigger privacy, then maybe having just like you doing your own multi-sig might be the way, or doing the single sig may be the way. It's all about sort of like examining your life, where you live, how much money you have, and trying to figure out what best solution works for you. And don't also be shy to maybe changing and progressing the solutions you have, mm-hmm. right? Maybe you start with like a phone app, right, that just have single sig and that's just easy Bitcoin, right? And then maybe you move on to having, maybe a system that has multi-sig with like a hardware wallet, right? Maybe you just move straight to a hardware wallet that has a seed. Different people will need different solutions and they will progress probably through their lifetime.
Yeah.
And I think it's about choice and portability, right? Like that is one advantage with a seed system.
It's
portable.
beautiful.
You don't like my platform? Great.
No, you have a seed, you have a wallet. That wallet breaks, you put the seed in a new wallet, boom, money appears.
Exactly.
It truly is fantastic, but to your point, it is hard to maintain that seed backup.
But I think you can also have privacy in a multi-sig model. So for example, with what we're building, you can tell the app how much money you want to spend, and when it requires the second signing of the hardware. Again, you as a customer owns the mobile app, you own the hardware. You could say, hey, I want every single transaction, regardless of size, to require 2 of the keys that I own. So it means the hardware has to communicate with the phone. We won't have access to that.
So are you running a node on the phone?
Still in development, thinking through what we're going to do there. But I think there's a way to balance privacy and security at the same time.
The main issue is if you have, if the service, right, the backend knows the XPub, which is essentially the public secret that generates addresses for you. if you have that information as a company, you can derive and understand exactly where all the money is, right? So I think
Only if it's linked to a user.
What?
Only if it's linked to a user. If you don't link the user data to the XPub, you know someone has this amount of Bitcoin, but you have no idea.
Oh, but that's
who.
the issue, right? If you're using the company server,
Correct.
right?
Correct.
You're essentially doxing those coins. But it's possible now to run nodes on phones, right? Or at least have a light client. So maybe you're just doxing an address, not the whole tree, right? And there's a balance, and there's also like time to market and trying to figure out what can you do to launch and sort of like get there.
Mm-hmm. We talked a little bit about at the beginning how the biggest problem, indisputably, is user error, right?
Yes.
Like not a lot of people are losing coins because hardware wallets are getting hacked. It's shit, I lost my seed, I sent my money somewhere I shouldn't have, all that kind of stuff. What do you guys think on the other side of that? Like when you are thinking about security, because we've discussed a little bit how to alleviate user error different ways. From your highly technical perspective, what are the greatest security threats that you're trying to build into the solutions?
So you want to go?
Seed Signer,
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
So we like this idea of making the attacker. So if you understand how like physical attacks happen, you probably understand that a lot. They are on a timer. Your attacker is always, time is against them, right? So how do you slow everything down? That's how we do security. So, you have multiple pins, you have decoy pins, you have timers on the device, so that you can slow everything down and try to regain some of the control of the situation, right? And then, depending on your appetite, the situation, then you progress with different sort of security features that we have on how to handle that situation.
I kind of on the flip side, our model is like, if I can quote Mr. Miyagi, the best block is no be there.
Yes.
So
Yes.
if the key is not stored on the device, then an attacker can't exploit the device to get the key. But if we're operating on that convenience security perspective, that spectrum, we're a little bit away from convenience, a little bit closer to security. But I like to encourage our users to put their trust in the protocol and put their trust in math. So you're going to have to think much more carefully about your seed phrases. You're going to have to think much more carefully about whether or not you choose to implement a BIP39 passphrase to supplement the security of your private key. And that's our model really encourages users to, once you're educated, dig in and think hard about not trusting a hardware wallet company's implementation of a secure element, or that there may be some unknown exploit for any given wallet. Put your trust in the protocol and in math, and store your Bitcoin that way.
I want to bring it back to the user and the use cases. I also wonder if maybe we're a little biased on this stage. I'm pretty sure all of us live in the Western part of the world, and many of you in the audience are going to be holding. But we are going to be launching in 6 continents, and the use cases that we're seeing in Nigeria, for example, is people are using Bitcoin to send and receive across borders. Mm-hmm. Why? And I say, but isn't it volatile? Well, it's less volatile than the Naira. Mm. And so I also want to make sure that we're building a wallet that people can send and receive money across borders fast, easy, and cheap. And so I definitely want to build an environment that is safe and secure, and it gives you optionality about what permissions you want to give to the hardware, what permissions you give to your phone. But we can't forget that it has to be easy to manage your money, to be able to move money across Lightning. Miles from the Cash team talked about that yesterday. How do we think about interoperability in these wallets? I don't want to have to think about, is that a QR code for Lightning or is that a QR code for on-chain? Customers don't care. Mm-hmm. They need to get it to the right person, and it needs to get there on time, fast, easy, and cheap.
Yeah, I think this speaks to the broad spectrum of use cases and users with Bitcoin, right? But Seed Signer, I want a follow-up question on what you were just saying. If you're, it seems like because of the product that you have, one of the primary considerations for security, I'm sure you and your users have given thought to this, is like, well, what do I do with my seed phrases? If like the device is just kind of like generic, off the shelf, whatever, it doesn't store much, so that's not a huge threat, but how I manage my seed phrase may be. And so, I'm sure we all have seed phrases like stored in various places, bank vaults, under rocks in the yard, whatever the hell it is. So have you given thought to that, and what are your insights on that category?
Absolutely, and Seed Signer was built kind of, the initial idea was very strongly correlated with multi-signature wallet use. It was part of my own journey of wanting to get to a multi-signature wallet and looking for a solution that made sense to me. So we leverage multi-sig so that if one of your seeds is compromised or lost, that's not the end of the game for you. If you have, your other seeds and the wallet descriptor, you can either recreate your wallet, or what I'm getting at is if you lose a seed, it doesn't necessarily mean you lose your money. So there is some fault tolerance in multi-sig. Again, I mentioned the BIP39 passphrases, but I do want to riff on Lindsay's comment about emerging markets and third world countries. And that's why we need a diverse array of solutions for different people. Because if you're in a country that either outright bans or even just discourages the use of Bitcoin, you may not be able to download the Cash App. You may not be able to order an Arculus kit through a trusted source. Or you may not just have access to those resources. So we're in the process of partnering with, we received a shout out from a human rights activist named Fadi El-Salameen yesterday, and him and I have been communicating privately. We were able to meet at the Human Rights Foundation conference last year, and we are working on solutions to get our software and our hardware model to a hardware profile that is more highly available and that can be distributed in parts of the world where people may not want to signal to others that they're using Bitcoin. It could be, represent a personal security risk to let others know, either in the government or just neighbors, that you're using Bitcoin. So initially, in other parts of the world, people are going to start with maybe a hosted Lightning wallet, or maybe they'll start with a phone wallet. But if they're truly using Bitcoin to save with, they're eventually going to get to the point where they're not comfortable carrying around their life savings in their pocket. Mm-hmm. And we want to give them access to the same solutions that people have in other parts of the world that include multi-sig and that include creative solutions to manage private keys.
Amazing, amazing.
I think one important part, just staying on the global narrative here too, is this is why self-custody is so important. Because right now, if you look at the exchange wallets, like a lot of them are not, they say they're operating globally, but actually they can't onboard customers in a lot of places. If you happen to be born in a country that has high fraud rates, but you yourself are a good actor, you're screwed. And so we need to be able that we can ensure that we can get wallets and we move money on networks that help people who have been historically left out of financial services.
Absolutely, yeah.
And this is why self-custody matters.
I agree. In the prep call for this discussion, we talked about, the anxiety that some can feel once they get into Bitcoin. They realize the value of it. They're starting to stack sats. But then they come up against that thing we mentioned at the beginning where they have to take responsibility for this. And we won't delve too much further into that because I'm sure we've all encountered that and hopefully have overcome it to some degree, although perhaps it's like an evergreen problem because the more wealth you're custodying, the more anxiety you might feel. When Bitcoin's $1 million a coin in a few years, maybe we're going to think, hey, my security setup ain't what it should be and I got to change it. But you guys are the ones actually building the solutions. So that's a tremendous amount of responsibility because you're the ones people are relying on for custodying all that Bitcoin. And so I'm curious, do you guys have anxiety when you're building these products? Because you realize, there's almost nothing more important, in the physical world, let's say, than someone custodying their wealth for the long term. And that's a massive responsibility. So Adam, why don't you reflect on that kind of responsibility that you're feeling?
Yeah, we certainly do that, and our customers are just absolutely the most important part of our life, right? It's customer first in design, customer first in experience, customer first in security. And for the last 10 years or so, we've been doing that for some of the largest brands in the world with our payments business. So as much responsibility as important it is for us to help you keep your Bitcoin safe, we've had to keep brands safe like American Express, Chase, HSBC, et cetera. So yeah, I personally feel a tremendous responsibility keeping people's Bitcoin safe.
MVK?
Yeah, so, we've seen those 10Xs, happening. And we have a simple rule, is don't lose money, right? We built these products for ourselves because we just weren't, happy with the trade-offs that were available in the market, right? And we like to say this, people need to play with Bitcoin to remove that anxiety, right? So the more play you have, so, install the wallet, play with the seeds, play with the hardware wallets, get like a few of them, play with them. Send money, receive money, lose some money, right? With all small amounts. And the more you do that, the more it becomes natural to you. The same way, like, you don't start freaking out every time you go with your credit card to pay for coffee, right? Because you've done that many times. But remember, your credit card could, like, be paying for, like, a few $1,000s too. But you just trust it because it became part of your normal life, right? And Bitcoin is very new for a lot of people.
Play with the test
so
net.
you'll take time.
Yeah, I'm going to come back to that in a second. But Seed Signer, what do you think about that responsibility of building for these people?
I'd echo what NVK just said about get out there and get your hands dirty, try different things, and play with the tools. That's the way that you build confidence, so that if Bitcoin grows like we expect it to, you're not going to be in this nerve-wracking moment where you're not really sure if the money that you own is really, like, if you really can control that and spend it if you want to.
If it's really there.
Right.
I have one little rule of thumb, is that always secure your money as if it was 10 times more.
Yeah, that's fair.
And they'll get you at least to the next time, because when the price goes up and you remember you had a few sats on a wallet and now it's worth a few $1,000s, right? You don't go nerve-wracking to move fast the money because it's worth more.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll jump in to answer your question about how it feels like for me as a builder. I've spent my whole career helping people manage their money, whether it was small businesses or consumers around the world. And the reason that I joined Block, formerly known as Square, is because they've had a long history in helping small businesses have products that are really easy to use, a great experience between hardware and software, but also extremely secure. And so for me, I felt like this was the best place that we could walk in the shoes of customers, we could feel that empathy, feel that weight, and make sure that we were designing something from scratch that was going to have customers' backs.
So to extend on this conversation, it doesn't get a lot of airtime, but talking about custody hygiene is basically what we're talking about now. And I'd like to dig into it a bit more if anyone has any insights, because it's one thing to be like, okay, this is a solution for me right now, and I'm comfortable with it up to the next 10x or something like that. But how should we be keeping our custody hygiene on a monthly or annual basis to make sure that we are alleviating that anxiety, to make sure it's where we think it is, to make sure that our availability is what it is? If I'm traveling, if certain situations befall me, what are my access points, and how reliable is my access to my Bitcoin? So do any of you have any hygiene best practices that you personally engage in or recommend?
Maybe I'll share one that's super simple. With what we're building, we're building a piece of hardware. You might have seen that Jack tweeted about it, I think it was 2 days ago, where we showed some prototypes of what the hardware looks like. I think it's really beautiful, but what we're going to advise customers to do is don't walk around with it in your pocket alongside your phone, because when those two things are together, you can unlock all of your money. And so we'll say, put the hardware somewhere safe, wherever you think that is. You set the permissions about when money movement requires that additional hardware to tap into the phone, but don't carry it around with you. You probably saw that hardware partnership with Fendi, right? The luxury designer, and then they had it on clipped on their purse like a luggage tag. Probably would recommend not to do that. So,
it's we've always advised customers, don't poop where you eat. If you're going to use a laptop that, it's, say, your laptop that, you do a lot of things and, it's general purpose computer, and that's the computer you have all your viruses, right? Maybe don't use that computer to do a lot of your transacting. Maybe use, have a different device if you can afford it and if it makes sense to your amount of coins. Don't use your hardware wallet to log in on your email, right? Like there's some out there that you have a feature to do two-factor authentication, something else. Segregation of funds will take you a long way, right? Use devices air-gapped, so don't put them on the internet. Don't keep them on your desk. Maybe put them somewhere else. Yes, don't carry a watch-only wallet on your phone that shows your whole wealth, even though you can't sign, because bad guys are not going to go after you if they don't know how much money you have. If they know how much you have and it's a lot, they're going to probably find it's interesting to go after you. And your phone is with you.
The only thing I'd have to add is make sure you involve the people that are important to you in your life in your self-custody hygiene. So I had this first-time very weird conversation with my wife before I left for Miami, and as I'm getting my things ready, she walks up out of the blue, and she's not a true blue Bitcoiner who thinks about Bitcoin every day. but she just brought up randomly, like, so can we just go through where the keys are and who I need to talk to?
Yeah. There is always that conversation.
Right.
Broke
So
when you
make
get
sure
home.
that the people in your life that you care about know what they need to know in case something happens.
It's so funny. Like when I travel and stuff, I always either send a message or have the conversation like, in case I die while I'm away, this is what you should do. And they're like, where are you going? Why are you saying this? I'm like, no. It's very unlikely. It's very unlikely.
Right.
But just in case.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I think the rule for me in hygiene is depth of defense. And I think about that a couple ways. One is keep your Bitcoin in a few different places, right? Nobody has one stock in their portfolio. You shouldn't have all of your Bitcoin in one place, right? It's a single point of failure. And then whatever platform you pick for your Bitcoin, it should have depth of defense, right? I can hand you my phone, I can hand you my Oculus card, you don't know my PIN and you don't have my biometric. So, whatever platform you pick, do the fundamentals, do that analysis, and make sure you understand how it works and make sure that those platforms have depth of defense.
It's been a long time since the average person was their own bank. Back in the day, it was normal. You had some cash under the mattress, hopefully the house doesn't burn, or you had some gold somewhere in the house. And we sort of we've lost all this knowledge and ability and self-reliance and responsibility over our own stashes, right? So what Bitcoin brought that and fast and furious to you is you are now your bank, right? So you have to keep this safe. And the bank does add some value, right? They're the guys that hire the guns to keep the safe. So you have to do some of that now. So that means you have to sort of think about how do I protect the wealth I have, right? How do I maintain it and don't lose it, either by my own self screwing up, which is the most common, or getting robbed, or a house fire, right? Most people are more exposed to a house fire than they are to a house robbery, for example. So having your seed on a metal plate, it's more likely to survive a house fire, right? So it's just this idea of reflecting on the responsibility of being your own bank.
Yeah. Well, guys, we're nearing the end. I'm sure we could discuss this topic for several hours, but any quick closing remarks before we shut this thing down?
Thanks.
Well, thank you guys for the work you've been doing to help us all secure our Bitcoin.